Did you know that, on average, black men in the United States receive sentences that are 19.1% longer than those given to white men convicted of the same offenses?
Additionally, 15.8% of black students report experiencing bullying or harassment based on their race. Conversely, African American-owned businesses are the fastest-growing segment within the women-owned business market, starting up at a rate 6 times higher than the national average. Despite these advancements, the country continues to confront its legacy of racism. Identifying the most racist towns in America is challenging, and this list may surprise, offend, or bewilder you.
For some, it might seem incomplete.
It's crucial to remember that not everyone in these towns harbors racist beliefs. Many individuals are actively working toward racial justice. Creating this list is difficult because large cities often report higher instances of hate crimes, which could be attributed to their greater diversity. Thus, this list combines anecdotal evidence, statistical data, and the impact of a town's racial history on its present state. If your town appears on this list, perhaps it's time for you to become a catalyst for change. As the saying goes, when we know better, we do better. Stay tuned for some intriguing trivia about place names you might never have considered. Now, let's explore America's most racist towns, listed without any specific order.
First on the list is Harrison, Arkansas. Located in Boone County in northern Arkansas, near the Missouri border, Harrison has earned the reputation of being the most racist town in America, a legacy deeply rooted both historically and currently.
The town's reputation was not helped by a viral video created by Bob Bliss titled, "Holding a Black Lives Matter Sign in America's Most Racist Town."
Bliss faced 3 days of abuse, racial slurs, despite being white himself, and even direct death threats. Although many residents are actively trying to change this reputation, overcoming it is a significant challenge, particularly since Harrison serves as the headquarters and mailing address for the Ku Klux Klan. Historically, Arkansas was a former slave state, gaining notoriety with the Harrison race riots of 1905 and 1909, during which the town violently expelled all but one black resident, establishing an all-white community. Since 2003, Harrison has had a community task force on race relations to combat racism, achieving some success, such as removing offensive billboards. A petition to remove one particular billboard garnered over 8,000 signatures. Hopefully, Harrison is making progress toward equality. Next, we travel to Anchorage, Alaska. While black Americans are not the only victims of racism, Anchorage has a particularly insidious form of prejudice against Native Alaskans. Though Alaska Natives constitute only 16% of the population, they represent 29% of all homicide victims, with Anchorage leading in violent crime statistics. Black Americans in Alaska make up only 4% of the population but account for 10% of homicide victims. Anchorage also faces a crisis of violence against Alaska Native women, with insufficient resources devoted to solving these crimes. The murder of Brandon Erlmeyer, whose Tlingit name means Old Man Raven, underscores this disparity. Nearly 6 years after his murder, no arrests have been made.
His memorial site has been vandalized by bullets and fire.
Erlmeyer's case has highlighted the broader epidemic of unsolved crimes against Alaska Natives. In Anchorage's school district, black students receive failing grades at twice the rate of white students, while Native Alaskan students fail at 3 times the rate of their white peers. This issue stems from achievement gaps, access to technology, and instructional inequities. Many Native Alaskan children are classified as L or English language learners, reflecting the impact of colonization and creating a disadvantage for Native Alaskan children thrust into an English-dominant environment. Since Alaska only became a state in 1959, it's not surprising that many people still speak their native languages at home. A positive aspect is that Anchorage is the fastest-growing city in terms of racial and ethnic diversity in the U.S. Number 3 brings us to Leith, North Dakota.
This otherwise small town in the middle of nowhere, with a population of 29, gained notoriety in 2012 when white nationalist Craig Cobb moved there and purchased 12 plots of land. Cobb's goal was to create an Aryan-centric enclave, as documented in the PBS film, Welcome to Leith. Cobb encouraged his followers to relocate to Leith, and by 2018, they managed to elect 2 white nationalists to the city council. This was a blow to Leith residents who organized protests and even petitioned Grant County to dissolve Leith as a city to remove the white supremacists from office.
Although the town was not dissolved, Cobb eventually sold his land and left.
Bobby Harper, the town's only black resident, reported that his life was disrupted and fraught with turmoil following Cobb's arrival and the influx of white supremacist followers. The residents of Leith fought hard to reclaim their town, and it's unfortunate that Leith's name is now associated with hate, despite the original residents, including Mr. Harper, never perceiving their town as racist before.
Cobb and one of his followers faced 7 felony counts of terrorizing town residents. Although the town successfully expelled Cobb in his attempt to take over, the stigma attached to Leith remains, as immortalized in a documentary. On the bright side, this situation demonstrated how even a tiny town with fewer residents than an apartment building could stand up for what's right and reclaim their community from racism and hate. Hold on tight, California, because you're number 4 on this list.
Racism isn't confined to the American South or rural towns with predominantly white populations.
Although cities like Los Angeles, with their significant racial diversity, evade this list due to their large populations, Fresno, the 5th largest city in California, does not. Fresno is essentially 2 different cities. The western half is predominantly Latino and black, with a visible lack of resources. This is not due to the residents but rather the city's neglect.
This neglect is evident in pothole-filled roads, overflowing landfills, and schools unable to meet the needs of their students.
One Fresno resident recalls being subjected to racial slurs by white teachers who clearly disliked being assigned to West Fresno. Over half of West Fresno's population lives below the poverty line, compared to only 27% in the rest of the city.
A simple search will reveal a city fraught with racial violence, accusations of racism among school boards, and governmental neglect in neighborhoods primarily occupied by people of color. This residential segregation is not accidental but by design.
Although redlining was outlawed over 50 years ago, it was a legal process in which people of color were denied mortgages, and white-only deeds restricted access to certain neighborhoods.
The legacy of redlining persisted informally long after the laws changed, resulting in the 2 distinct Fresnos we see today. The city's residents are working to address these systemic issues from the past that continue to affect the present. 5th on the list is Vidor, Texas, a small town in the southeastern part of the state, just east of Houston.
Vidor was one of many communities known as sundown towns,
where black Americans were not allowed after dark. In some of these towns, signs explicitly stated, "Whites only after dark." Despite attempts by Vidor's mayors to change its reputation, many black Americans still avoid stopping for gas in Vidor. According to the 2020 census, Vidor has a population of about 8,600, with only 39 black residents. The first black resident moved to Vidor in 1993 amid protests led by the Ku Klux Klan. This was part of an effort to desegregate the town, and despite his efforts to encourage more black residents to move in, only 5 others did. Little has changed since then. In 2020, following George Floyd's death, a Black Lives Matter march was organized in Vidor. This event forced the town to confront its reputation, and while the march was seen as a victory for its mere existence, it was met with backlash from many residents and counter-protesters. Vidor's residents have attempted to use social media to dispel the notion of racism in their town, but even many of these posts contain racist undertones. Vidor has a long way to go, but the participation of many residents in the Black Lives Matter march offers hope that change might be on the horizon.
Unfortunately, we remain in the South for the next entry. Number 6 is Rochelle, Georgia, and more accurately, the entire county of Wilcox.
However, the town's youth have played a significant role in exposing this issue and compelling the community to confront its historical legacy.
Wilcox County is located centrally in Georgia and holds traditional values, including those surrounding proms.
Historically, proms in Wilcox County were segregated, with black students having their own separate events from their white peers. This practice persisted for 70 years until students from Wilcox County High School petitioned to end it and integrate the prom.
They succeeded in 2014, with Black Lives Matter also drawing attention to this discriminatory practice.
While the integrated prom was seen as a positive step, there is still much work to be done.
Rochelle, like many other towns, continues to wrestle with its history of segregation.
With the students leading the way, Rochelle, Georgia, may be on the path to overcoming the systemic racism that has long plagued it.
Number 7 brings us to Crown Heights in Brooklyn, New York. This neighborhood has historically been diverse, with significant Black and Jewish populations. However, this diversity has not always led to peaceful coexistence. Despite New York's progressive image, Crown Heights was the site of a race riot in 1991, which resulted in several deaths and injuries, including the fatal stabbing of Jewish man Yankel Rosenbaum and the brutal beating of Black teenager Gavin Cato. This violence stemmed from long-standing racial tensions and discriminatory practices, including police brutality and systemic racism. Anti-Semitic incidents have persisted in Crown Heights beyond the 1991 riots. In 2018, anti-Semitic flyers were posted on a synagogue. Racial tensions and anti-Semitism have been issues in this neighborhood for decades.
The rise in violence and hate crimes in New York City has only intensified these tensions in Crown Heights. Despite community efforts to address these issues, Crown Heights remains a symbol of complex racial dynamics within a seemingly progressive city.
Number 8 on our list is Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Known for its high quality of life, Milwaukee has a hidden side marked by significant racial disparities.
The city unfortunately hosts the highest racial achievement gap in the United States, evident in its school system where Black students face suspension rates more than twice the national average.
Milwaukee also has the worst racial disparities in income, education, and criminal justice nationwide.
This stark contrast is exacerbated by the city's history of segregation, which has left many Black residents with insufficient resources and limited opportunities.
Efforts to tackle these issues include initiatives by organizations like Rid Racism Milwaukee, which seeks to promote racial equity and justice within the community.
However, Milwaukee's racial disparities underscore the ongoing struggle for equality.
Number 9 takes us to Honolulu, Hawaii.
Often seen as a paradise, Hawaii faces its own racial challenges, particularly for Native Hawaiians.
Although Native Hawaiians make up only 10% of the population, they account for 51% of the homeless population on Oahu. The high cost of living, partly driven by tourism, disproportionately impacts Native Hawaiians, leading to notable economic and social disparities. Additionally, historical colonization and the loss of land and cultural practices have contributed to the current difficulties faced by Native Hawaiians. Responsible tourism practices and support for Native Hawaiian-owned businesses are crucial steps toward addressing these disparities. The issues faced by Native Hawaiians in Honolulu highlight the need for a more equitable approach to development and social justice. Finally, we arrive at Pulaski, Tennessee, known for being the birthplace of the Ku Klux Klan. Founded in 1865, the Klan's origins are still commemorated in the town with a plaque. Some view this plaque as a symbol of defiance against the Union, while others find it offensive and a stark reminder of the town's troubling past. Efforts to counteract Pulaski's reputation include initiatives like the Unsung Heroes Project, aimed at highlighting local heroes and addressing historical injustices. Despite its reputation as the Klan's birthplace, Pulaski's efforts to confront and overcome this legacy offer a path toward reconciliation and progress. Bonus: numerous towns and landmarks across the U.S. bear racially offensive names, such as those containing the term squaw or Negro. These names reflect a racist past, and there is ongoing discussion about renaming these places.
For example, there are 799 sites named squaw, and many others named after Confederate figures. Addressing these names is part of a broader effort to acknowledge and rectify historical wrongs. While this list includes towns with troubling racial histories or current issues, it's important to recognize the progress being made and the individuals fighting for change. Understanding and addressing these issues is vital for fostering a more equitable society.